Hi, so this is like my third try getting this to work. I need a new computer. I need like a production studio. I need staff. I couldn't get sound from the YouTube to play in the background so I could open the scene right with some music rather than silence and all you hear is me reading. So anybody who's following me knows that I am Superwoman, or at least the creator thereof. And this is the man I'm challenging to read one of my movie projects. In fact, he should probably read them all, but at least the Smallville movie. This is our first picture, first meeting. This is me now, just after that, and this will be the end goal. Back to my normal self pre-baby. So, I'm going to record the Smallville movie today. Pray I don't make too many mistakes. I'm not even sure if the copy I have is the final, newest, edited version. There might be some typos I might accidentally read out loud. But this is no holds barred. This is it. I've had enough. I started this 3 years ago, and it's not finished because I can't get this actor, this man, to stop acting, stop going places without a script, without reading a script. I'm trying to get him to read the script. So I figured if I read the script and I blow the secret and let all the fans see it and they all listen to it and they all get excited and like it and love it and support it, then maybe enough people when they see him who's seen this video, who's listened to the story, tells him again and again at all the Comic-Cons, you need to make this movie. You need to meet Jennifer's movie. You need to read this. So on the front of it is a picture of a ranch located in a small town in British Columbia. And on that picture, it says Field of Dreams, which Kevin Costner is doing a documentary on. Well, there's a documentary crew supposedly doing a documentary. So they need to go to the secret place that I knew about many, many, many years ago. So it's proof that I'm meant to be working in this industry and working with Kevin Costner. So that it's part of my Field of Dreams. That all these connecting factors to Tom and my career as a writer. So, yeah, making the Smallville movie, making my trilogy for Supergirl 2, 3, and 4, my You've Got Mail 2 movie, and a plethora of other materials. Well, those will be all part of my Field of Dreams. So without further ado, this is, ta-da! I think I've showed this before. I don't think I read through the whole thing. I think I was doing segments of it. I'm going to do my best to read through all of this. So let's not waste any time, because I don't know how much time it's going to take. Okay. Once upon a time, in a castle far, far away, was a young boy growing up to be a man, whose world would be changed by the love and life of two very important people to him. This is that story. Kent, England, was beautiful country. Rolling hills, green grass, showered with glorious architecture everywhere. Our story begins in the castle known as Leeds. Young Master Kent was growing up well. He had everything life in a castle has to offer, the finest clothes, the finest food, and staff to pamper his every request. On this day, his father had arranged plans to take his son for a drive into the big city, to teach his son about his world of business, for it was his hope and dream that his young son, Jonathan, would grow up to one day follow in his footsteps and take his place at the head of his father's work. Jonathan's father. The car is waiting for us outside, son. Are you ready? Today is a big day for us as father and son. Are you excited to see what I do that affords us the privileged life we have? Jonathan. Yes, sir. I guess so, sir. Jonathan sort of shrugs his shoulders as he walks in his father's direction, who is now holding the door open for the two of them to leave. He did have to admit, he does like those drives through the countryside and into different villages. The young boy then scurried quickly to the car, where the door was open for him to climb into the back. His father climbed in seconds after that, and the door was closed behind them as they settled into their seats. Looking over at his son, he says, Jonathan's father, I I'm taking you somewhere you've never been today, to show you another side of life that you are now old enough to see. 10 years old is quite an impressionable age, and as your father, I want you to be given the right impressions about life when you're an adult in the fast-paced, ever-changing world that surrounds us is like. Jonathan says, "Okay, father, but I have been into the city before, father." Jonathan's father, "Well, you've never been where we are going today." "We're settled in, driver." "Anytime you're ready, Baxter, we can go." "Right then, sir, here we go." Baxter starts the car and pulls away from Leeds Castle and drives around the fountain in the driveway and out and down a very long road ahead of them. It was indeed a breathtaking sight. Baxter appreciated the ability to drive in and out of on a regular basis as part of his life's working routine. Who wouldn't like his job? Jonathan settled in for the drive into London, which was more than an hour away. He quickly started looking out the window to study the vast, rich, but yet very mundane countryside. It was the same things every day. The rituals of life at Leeds Castle was always the same. Everything was so predictable. There might be some convenience to having access to anything you want and being waited on hand and foot, but Jonathan understood it to be unwieldy or cumbersome. Rather, life for him anyways wasn't so productive. He always had these dreams to one day break away, to be free of his family's way of life and etch out a life and adventures of his own. This is where the young boy's depression would kick in, understanding he has many, many years to go before he will reach such a day of freedom and life. Unlike the life he is aware his father wants him to live, but he doesn't dare try and talk to his father about, has different visions and viewpoints. But Jonathan understood that one day he would be old enough to make his own choices in life. Till then, all he can do is bide his time and follow his parents' instructions. The car finally stopped outside this big building with beautiful beams and lots of steps to climb. Jonathan turned to his father and said, "What is this place, father?" Jonathan's father replies, "This is a bank, my boy. It holds money for a lot of people. This is just one of our stops for the day." The door opened and his father climbed out and turned back and gestured for his son to follow. Once outside the car, standing on the sidewalk, the young boy Jonathan Kent immediately noticed something very sad and rather out of place, considering this was a bank they were standing at. There was this man, very wrinkly looking from the thinness of his body. His clothes were very old and raggedy. He had some bags that were sitting beside him on the steps, and a really scruffy looking dirty dog, with the cutest face Jonathan ever seen, considering he didn't get to see dogs close up all that often. His mother was allergic to everything, so dogs and cats were not animals allowed at any of the family castles. There was this smell coming from the man and the dog that was unfamiliar to Jonathan and rather unpleasant, too. It's not something he wished to encounter too often in his life. He looks up at his father and says, "Who's that, father?" Jonathan's father turned to look at what his son was looking at and turned back to his son and said, "Oh, that's just a bum, my son. Vagabond, as it were." Jonathan, "What's that?" Vagabond. A bum. Jonathan never in his entire life had seen the likes of a person or a pet so out of sorts and bad off in his life. He was confused and very saddened by what he saw. And another thing he started to feel for this man and his dog was sympathy and compassion. He could see they needed love and a hand up in the world, and he looked back up at his father and said, "Why don't we help him, father? He clearly needs new shoes and some clothes and a jacket, since the cooler weather will be rolling in very shortly, and they could both probably use some food. I can't imagine how hungry they are. I've never had to go without food." Jonathan's father, "And you never will, my son. Come on, let's go. We haven't the time to spare to talk about this man and his circumstances any more. I can't be responsible for all the poor people in the world, son. I'm sure he will be all right. London offers lots of resources for those kinds of people, and I'm sure he knows where every single one of them is. He grabbed Jonathan by the hand and began to walk up the stairs toward the big, cold-looking bank doors. Jonathan was confused by his father's reaction. He was rather disappointed and couldn't help but continue to look back at the poor man and his dog. As they were walking away, he wanted so desperately to help the two of them. Right then and there, a life-changing experience happened. Young Jonathan knew that he didn't want to grow up to be his father or any of his father's rich friends and business associates who were self-absorbed and obnoxious money-making people. It was then that Jonathan remembered something. Early that day, while getting ready for the trip to London, he went to his piggy bank, took some money out for shopping while in the city for the day. Wasting no further time, as his father pulled them further and further away from the poor man, took his free hand and reached into his right pocket and shuffled through the big British coins that were in his pocket. With his hand gripped tight on what he was sure was the right one, he pulled it out of his pocket and looked at it, smiling at the shiny big $2 coin in his hand. He rubbed his thumb over it quickly, then turned to look over his shoulder to see how far away the man and dog were. Once analyzing the distance and the strength of his throw he'd need, he wound his arm up and around like a man giving a pitch in a baseball game. 1, 2, 3. With his arm straight up and hand in the right direction, he let the coin go with a great toss and held his breath while he watched it fly away. About 15 seconds later or so, he could see it land and hear a light ping sound of the coin landing on the ground just a few feet away from the two on the steps behind him. The dog barked as though he understood and was saying thank you. Whoop, whoop! Jonathan thought to himself, but dogs don't speak human. He shook his head, clear, and then a second bark as the poor man got up with a smile on his face after hearing the coin land and looking in the direction of the sound. Woof! Once he picked up the coin, he looked at the boy and smiled while waving at him and said the words, thank you, as the poor man's dog stood up next to his owner and started wagging his tail and barked for a third time. Woof! Jonathan's father, too busy focusing on the climb up all those big stairs, turned to look at his son with a jerk and said, what was that? What did you just do? Jonathan was quick to turn to his dad and say, nothing. By the time Jonathan's dad turned around to look at the poor man with the dog, the man and his dog were walking away. Inside Jonathan's head was a boy convinced there must be a God or some other life out there in outer space somewhere that caused the dog to bark as though he understood what money in Jonathan's gesture meant. The feeling of pride and joy that swelled up inside Jonathan as his father continued to drag him forward into this big British bank was so elating and wonderful he actually felt for a moment like he was walking on clouds. This feeling, he thought to himself, with a release of a deep, satisfied breath, a smile on his face, is one that he's decided he wants to know for the rest of his life. And so on that day he made the vow that he would do what he has to find the place in his life as he grows that will allow him to feel these kinds of moments of joy again and again, making him the man he was too young still to understand that he longed to be, but was sure one day he'd grow up to be. That's the journey that now leads us to the 21st century and a beautiful country home in a small town simply known as Smallville. Second part, The Stranger. Finding that cigarette butt is like a needle in a haystack. As he drives to the plant answering the call to investigate whether or not what's brought him there is an accident or arson. Music in the background, Gowan, A Criminal Mind, as the scene starts. A criminal mind is all I've ever known. Ask one who knows me if I'm really so bad. I am. A Camaro is driving into town, leaving dusty tracks behind it. She, the stranger, drives with one hand on the wheel, going too fast down the dirt road. Without thought, her left knee takes the wheel and starts to steer as the flask of whiskey in her right hand raises to her mouth. Before reaching her lips, her left hand pulls out the dangling cigarette, throws it out the window. The cigarette butt hits the ditch on the other side of the road. The ash, still hot, picks up some of the brittle dry straw, and it starts to crack, leaving lipstick on the filter as the only source of evidence that can later be used to ID the stranger. She continues driving for some time down the road, right through town without a care about the car driving her way in the opposite direction. While driving drunk, chaotic, and crazy, they whiz by one another at 180 kilometers an hour. For finding speed attractive, the Camaro raised his eyebrow. No time to turn around now as he glanced out of his mirror to try and land her plate number. With no success, he focused his eye back on driving. Always undercover, she says to herself out of breath, slamming on the brakes, landing on a dead-end road in Smallville. The fire spread quickly. Much of the field around the surrounding area was lost in burnt umber, for what was left of the value never sold. It was too late to change the damage done. All he could do was walk amongst the debris. Farmer's gold is his garden. His crop is what defines him. Though this field was never a farmer's, he still felt the quiet loss of what losing a farmer's dream feels like. Later on, Lex is back in his office, and he's on the phone and says, "What do you mean the investigators believe there's no foul play? And how might they explain this happened? There hasn't been a forest fire or field fire like that since I was a kid. So don't tell me it was the sun and the course of nature that did it." Person on the other end of the phone. "Actually, Lex, they did find something that explains it, but they're afraid to tell you for themselves for fear of your reaction." Lex: "What was it? Don't leave me hanging. What did they find?" Person on the end of the phone. On the other end of the phone. "They found a cigarette butt, Lex. It has a woman's lipstick on it, so whoever was smoking it was a girl they know, that much. But they do not suspect foul play, that's all, sir." Lex: "What do you mean, that's all? What am I supposed to do with this burnt field? Do cigarette fires fall under my insurance policy as something they cover? I had better get to work figuring that out. And you, find out who that cigarette belonged to." Person on the other end: "Well, that might be slightly expensive, Lex. Are you sure that's what you want?" "Yes, of course I'm sure. Why would you ask a Luther such a ridiculous question? Spare no expense. I have a few words in mind I would like to exchange with this mysterious lady about her careless smoking, and I mean to have this conversation with her." Person on the phone: "Okay, Lex, whatever you say. I'll be in touch with you soon. Soon as I know more." Lex slammed down the phone. Ding! Screamed at the top of his lungs while sitting there alone in his office. "Ah!" Lex says, "A cigarette butt?" That said, he took a couple of shots of very expensive rye in an attempt to lower his blood pressure. While holding his glass, he noticed something flashing on the computer screen in front of him. He leaned forward and looked carefully at what was flashing. It was an ad about Benson corn mazes, the largest corn maze in the world. He clicked on the ad, which led to a website where he saw pictures after pictures of corn mazes. The one for the restaurant McDonald's was the biggest one he had ever seen. He whistled at the thought of what it took to make it. Then immediately wondered how much it would cost to have something like that grown in his field. In this way, he could then call himself a farmer and know what it feels like to produce something fun and edible. No harm could come from him being a corn farmer for one summer of his life, he gathered. Lex says, "Yes, I think this would be fun. Smallville is going to need something to do around Halloween anyway, which is before the fair, so that should attract a lot of visitors. This might just be the answer to all my problems. Lex sat back with his glass and took another shot. Maybe the field burning down isn't such a bad thing. There is something good that may yet still come of it. Next segment, the reunion begins. Clark. Yes, Mother, I promise I will be there for 5 o'clock, right on time for dinner. You know how much I love your cooking, and I sure wouldn't want it to get cold on me. I'm looking forward to seeing you and the farm. It has been too long. Clark's mother. Yes, Clark, it certainly has been too long. But I guess that's what reunions are for, to help us stop what we're doing, slow down, and think about what is real to us, who, where, and what we're missing, and to find the time to be made, to take the time to go and deal with what is important, like helping your mother on the farm during the harvest season. Okay, you should get back to concentrating on the road. I wouldn't want there to be an accident, and you sure don't want a ticket. They fine people a lot of money now. Clark. Yes, that's true. The government sure does know where to stick it to people. Okay, I will see you soon. I love you, Mom. Clark's mother. I love you too, son. I will keep on the lookout for you. Take care and drive safe. Clark says, I will, Mother. Don't worry. I'm a very good driver. They both laughed at that and then ended their call to each other. Once settled into his old room, which has been left the way it was when he left for the city some years ago, finding himself in the family room while his mother was cooking, he was casually rummaging through the paperwork of his legal adoption to them and smiling over the first pictures of him with his parents taken on a Polaroid. He dug a little deeper into the box, not expecting there to be anything out of the ordinary. As he laid the pictures and papers out on the table, he found a newspaper clipping with a picture and small article clipped to it. The article talked about a female child found in Norfolk, Virginia. It was stated that it just looked like she had anonymously been abandoned. In closing, the investigation done to try to discover a trace on her parents never resulted in any success. She was handed over to the Child and Family Services Department, who later put her up in an orphanage. In the background of the picture, where she was found, you could see in the distance something that looked like a hole or crater in the ground. Not big enough to be the story, but big enough for Clark to understand that it wouldn't be in that box of paper without a reason. So he asked his mother if she remembered this article and what the reason behind it might be as to why it would be in the box. His mother looked at it for a long, hard moment, but couldn't recall anything. Shrugged her shoulders, she said, No, sorry, I haven't got a clue. Your father is the one likely behind that, and unfortunately, he's not here to ask. Then in silence handed it back to him and continued on with what she was doing. As Clark went to put the article back amongst everything from the box, out of the corner of his eye he spotted the date the article was written on. That sudden shock being brought to his attention, he carefully put the aged paper in his wallet. Without saying anything to his mother, he continued on with the rest of their visit. When it was done, he left and went to his room to put what he found in a place that was safe until he could take the time to look into the matter deeper. And then he rejoined his mother, but all he could think about was that article and wanting to find out more about the eerie coincidence the date had to the arrival of when he landed here on Earth in the family's farm field in Smallville all those years ago. Thanksgiving in the Clark household is such an awkward time now. Clark almost doesn't know what to say to his mother, and she feels much the same way. Clark, Mom, he says, maybe we should look at doing something a little bit different next year for Thanksgiving. I mean, it's not that I don't like coming home to visit you and spend time with you, his mother says. Of course not, son. I know you love me. You don't have to finish what you're saying. I understand. The two of them sitting here together, alone, these last couple of years has been, well, sort of boring, she says, instead of obvious sad word with Jonathan not there. Clark says, it's just that a change of scenery or environment might do us both a world of good. His mother says, agreed, son, but what's to stop us from finding something different to do this year? Right now, today, in fact. There has got to be something we could do. Someplace we could go for a few hours? Clark, Mom? She says, yes, son? What about this turkey? You can hear his stomach growl as he takes a whiff of the beautiful smell in the air as it's cooking away in the oven. She says, oh, right, yeah, that. Guess that is the problem. That would put a kink in our plans. If we're to just leave the house now, wouldn't it? Well, we could always just turn it off and finish cooking it when we come back. Clark's stomach growling loudly. She says, never mind, with the expression on her face that says it all, for not being able to miss the sound of his stomach demanding food. Clark, you see, I don't like going hungry. There's this little thing called food, and well, Mom, I really like it. And I especially like coming here to eat yours. It's the one day of the year I go all day without food, with the exception of a small breakfast, of course, so I can look forward to your cooking and eating to my heart's content. Yet on the other hand, I do have an idea of something we could do together that would be fun and is open today. Last walkthrough is 9 p.m. She says, oh, what's that, son? Well, if I told you that, then it wouldn't be a surprise anymore, now would it? She says, well, no, I guess it wouldn't be then, would it? But what are we going to do about the turkey and your stomach, son? Because from where I am standing, if you were to do too much physical activity, you look like you just might faint from the lack of food, nutrition. On that note, the two of them share a big laugh, and it suddenly occurs to them both at the same time, in one word, what their answer for the current adventure is going to be. A picnic! They both say it at the same time. Something they haven't been on together for many years. Not since Jonathan died. Clark says, I'll grab a picnic basket and blanket and double check that all the stuff we need is in there. Fill up or replace what is needed. She says, good idea, son. I will find us stuff to put in the basket. I have a big kitchen. I'm sure I can find things in here we could eat to hold us over and enjoy eating at the same time, not to take away from the turkey with all the trimmings. We will have to eat when we return from wherever you want to take your mother today. Meanwhile, Clark was already in the other room while his mother was still talking, though he could hear every word. Opening the closet door, he looked up and the basket sat on the shelf, unused, squeezed tightly into place, till it suddenly gave way and it fell off the shelf and right into his arms when he reached out to stop it from falling to the floor. It was after midnight before Clark's head hit the pillow. He had never been so hungry in his life. It was well after 9 o'clock by the time his mother and him got to finally sit down to dinner and eat the turkey with all the trimmings. His stomach looked like a pitcher's mound from eating so much. They had a good first day together, he thought, as he drifted off to sleep with the pleasant feelings of his stomach from being stuffed. Tomorrow would be a new day. It's been a while since he's had to step foot inside the high school. As his thoughts were hoping for the best, sleep took him to dreamland. Day 2. High school. Walking through the halls for the first time in over a decade, Clark took note of what was different and what wasn't. One of the things that was different, he spotted in the gymnasium. There was a new lady in town, and all over the floor was a bunch of first aid supplies and dummies. So evidently she was connected to some sort of first aid class. While observing quietly at the door, Lana sneaks up behind him. quietly and whispers in his ear. Come to think of it, Clark, I don't think you yourself have ever taken a first aid course. A little ironic, don't you think? How much of a real Superman can you be without it? Clark, I've managed so far in life to get along without it, haven't I? But yes, I do see your point. Maybe while I'm in town I might sign up for the class. Should be interesting to see how well I do. I mean, how hard can it be? Lana, you'd be surprised, Clark. You'd be surprised. She pats him on the shoulder and walks away smiling. Clark decides to go introduce himself to this new face in town. Walks over to where she is and stands in front of her and smiles as he puts out his hand to shake hers, saying, Hi, I'm Clark, a former student of the high school. I would just like to introduce myself since I've never had the pleasure of meeting you before. First aid teacher smiling back, puts the dummy in her hand down and reaches out to shake his back. Hi, my name is Janet. I'm glad to make your acquaintance, Clark. You're famous in the hallways of this school. I've seen pictures of you everywhere. Clark, oh, those pictures. They're still hanging around in this school? How embarrassing. Janet, are you interested in taking first aid? Yes. Yes, I think I might just be. Where do I sign up? Janet, right over there on the desk, there is a sign-up sheet for the different dates of when the new classes begin. Pick one. I would love to see you in one of my classes. I have a feeling you will be chock full of entertainment. Clark, I'll take that as a compliment, and I will see you in class. Walks over to the sign-up sheet, flips through the dates, picks the right one for him, and signs it. Clark, you've been teaching here long? Janet, about 6 months. I was contacted by the school guidance counselor and asked if I would participate in helping to teach the students here how to save lives. It's part of some kind of new school initiative, which of course I'd be crazy to turn down. I'm all about saving lives. Clark, how are you liking it here so far? Janet, the students here are pretty pleasant and been a joy to work with, as I hope the same will be when it comes to time to teach you, Clark. Clark, well, I will do my best to try and not disappoint. It was a pleasure talking with you, Janet. I'm sure I will be seeing you around. If not, I will see you in class. Janet, yes, Clark. See you around. Clark waved goodbye and left the gym and continued on with his Smallville mission. Clark only has a few days to find someone to take to the dance. He didn't return to Smallville with anyone in mind. He was here more for his mother than he was about the school reunion. But he knew there was no need to be a wet blanket about the situation. At the very least, he should try and not show up to the dance alone. Kent, England. Clark. Hey, Mom, can I ask you something? Where are you? Clark's mother. I'm upstairs, dear. I'll be right down. Clark. Okay, I'm in the study room. There's something you need to see. There was only silence after that for the next couple of minutes until his mother walked into the room and said, What is it, dear? Clark. Have you seen or know anything about this? He showed his mother what he had been looking through. Paperwork, including a small stack of newspaper articles and pictures of castles. Clark had never seen any of this before and wondered why his father wouldn't share any information about it. Clark's mother reaches out and takes the newspaper article from Clark's hand and turns it around to look at it. And the second she saw Leeds Castle, her face went white as a ghost. She gasped and sat down before speaking. Clark's mother. Leeds Castle. Oh my word. Where did you find this? Clark. I've been going through my adoption box of papers and other stuff Dad had put in here, and I didn't know what to make of what I'd just discovered. All these articles talk about a place called Kent. There are pictures and stories about different castles there. Clark's mother. Well, I never knew your father was collecting this stuff either. But you are right, you have the right to ask. Your father and I should have sat you down a long time ago and told you about this. Kent is in England. It is where your dad comes from. His family is English and a very well-to-do family. When your father left home, he decided he wanted to make it in the world on his own instead of taking trust fund money to live. He was sick of the life his family attempted to instill on his soul. He wanted nothing to do with what most of his family is like. It was a tough choice he had to make, but he clearly thinks he made the right choice, because look at what he got to show for it. This farm and us. She smiled at Clark. Clark, you mean to tell me Dad's rich? That his family has lots of money? And that I could have had a pair of $300 sneakers every once in a while? And a cashmere sweater? He smiled and laughed, waiting for his mother's reply. Clark's mother. Yes, I suppose you have the right to poke fun at that a little, because your dad could have asked for his money any time and treated us both to some of the finer things in life once in a while. I can agree that something cashmere would have been quite nice indeed. Clark, wait a minute. This also means that Dad didn't need to sell the quarter section of the land. He could have just called his parents and asked for his trust fund money. Well, I might love my father, but I'm not afraid to say that that might not have been one of his better decisions. Clark's mother. You are right, Clark, as usual. You are right. I suppose it was just as easy as that for him to fix the financial problems around here. But we have to look at how old he was and how set in his ways he also happened to be. Is that it? Can I go finish what I was doing upstairs? Clark. Yes, I suppose for the moment you're free to go. But I'm not letting you off the hook that easy. We will talk about this some more later. After all, you are an accomplice in keeping this from me. You could have told me too. Clark's mother. Yes, I could have. But I only went there with your father a few times when we were dating, so I feel much the same way your father did, estranged and uncomfortable, when I think about those people and their castles. Clark. All right, Mom, thanks for cooperating with me. You can tell me more another time when you have more time. Right now, I have to get ready for the town fair. Can't figure out what I want to do. I thought to volunteer to be in the dunk tank, but when I asked about it, I was told someone has already been chosen for it. So I'm not sure what I can do to do my part. Clark's mother. Ever thought about just going for the good time for yourself, Clark? Doesn't make you a bad person, you know. Besides, I'd enjoy the company. But if I'm gonna be ready for this, then I too should get back to work. Oh, and one more thing, Clark. Whenever I tried to bring the whole childhood thing up in England, he always said the same thing. Your father, Jonathan, said, it rained a lot. Clark's mother. I have no idea what that is supposed to mean. That is all I can tell you. If something else relevant comes to my mind, I will let you know. Clark. How about your memories of when you were just dating Dad? You must have met some of his family, and he had to have said some things to you. That's the stuff that I'd like us to find the time to talk about. But not today. As today, I would love to go to the fair with you. Moms are great people to hang out with for such fun. His mother cut him off. Clark's mother. When you haven't a date or a table of your own to run. She laughed. It's all right, son. I get it. That's what moms are for. She got up from her seat, went over to him, and gave him a hug, and then left the room with him, staring at the box of secret papers that Jonathan never revealed to anyone on time. After his mother left the room, Clark decided to email Lex to hear back from him about the terrible news of the fire that burned down the field owned by them. The story goes that there was no one to be seen in the vicinity at the time he arrived at the site when fire trucks were trying to put it out. Hey Lex, it's Clark here. I got into town just a few days ago. Enjoyed Thanksgiving with my mom, and of course, I've also visited the school where I heard about your ordeal. I just thought I would drop you a line to see how you're doing and ask whether any arrests have yet to be made, or at least do you know who might be the suspect? If you want to meet somewhere, just let me know. Take care, Clark. Not even 5 minutes passed when Lex replied. Clark guessed that Lex was sitting at his desk when his email arrived. Hey, Clark. Thanks for your concern about the field. You're not going to believe what the investigation found. They said they found a cigarette butt, and that was the culprit. Imagine that, someone's careless smoking burned down the field. With the kind of dry, hot weather we get in the summers here, it's not to be a surprise that something so small could cause something so big to happen. Anyway, the investigation's conclusion was that they don't suspect any foul play. But I'm going to pay to see if I can find out whose DNA is on that cigarette butt so I can confront them with the harm that their smoking has caused to my life. I'm sure we'll see each other soon, Clark. I think I will find the time to make an appearance at the fair, so maybe I'll see you there. Take care, Lex Luthor. Next segment, Kent Holidays. Clark's mother was in the sitting room when he walked in and said, So is this a good time for us to talk about the things Dad did tell you about his life? Clark's mother, I suppose it is. There's only one way to deal with this, and that's just by telling you what I know. She smiled and patted the couch seat next to her. Clark took a seat. Clark's mother, your father told me of his memories of holidays in the home. How grand the events were and how staunchy everyone in his family was, and how those guests of theirs were staunchy too. Moving to Jonathan's mind as that young boy, looking through the window, watching guests come in, hoping no one could see where he was hiding away from the crowds. He felt this big, gaping wound of loss and loneliness. He just didn't fit into his family's world, no matter what he did. He couldn't put his finger on what it was like. He couldn't put his finger on what it was he didn't like, but he just didn't like all these yearly customs and all the money they spent on the holidays so lavish. He hid in his room as much as possible, except where he was needed to make an appearance a time or two. Halloween was so outrageous, all the crazy costumes, but as a young boy, that was what he would admit to coming downstairs to look at. That's what he liked. What kid doesn't like Halloween costumes, right? Anyways, what everyone coming in was wearing. He also had to admit that chocolate and treats were divine. He would eat so much some years, he'd give himself toothaches and stomach aches too. What else was he to do locked up in that world at such a young, defenseless age? The event would go on until wee hours of the morning. Last guests would leave around 2 a.m., and all the excitement always kept Jonathan awake. He could never bring himself to fall asleep until the guests were all gone, and all the music and sounds that reached the halls of the house were done playing. And then there was Christmas. Jonathan's mother calling up to her son, Jonathan, please come downstairs and join the family. It's Christmas Eve and time to exchange gifts with everyone. Jonathan loved Christmas best. It was the one time of year that he was excited about the prospect of what new things he might like from his family. that sat so beautifully wrapped under the tree. Jonathan said, "Okay, Mother, I'm on my way." But Jonathan didn't so much like hanging with his huge family of aristocrats. He wasn't much like them at all. In the large dining area, where everyone was sitting around the table still munching away on Christmas delights, he took a seat. In front of everyone on the table, there were gifts for each person to open. This year, Jonathan had a fairly large box standing upright, so as to fit on the table. Jonathan's father said, "Glad you could finally join us, my son. It has been unanimously decided that since you are the youngest at the table, everyone agrees that you should open your gift first." Jonathan, "Yes, Father. Thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful for the family I have," he said, not sure under his breath how much he meant that part. He carefully lifted the big box down onto the floor, and got comfortable himself and began unwrapping it. Jonathan, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. However did any of you know? I swear I never peeped a word to anyone." He quickly tore into the rest of the wrapping paper after the initial tear gave way that he was being given a train set. Choo choo! This would be his favorite childhood memory for Christmases in his life. Of this he was certain. Jonathan, looking at his older brother. "You told someone, didn't you? I told you, and you told Mom or Dad or someone. Why, I could just hug you to death for this, because I truly wasn't expecting this." When he was done with the wrapping paper, he did just that. He went around the room and cordially hugged his family members for the best gift ever. After seeing this fine train set, young Master Jonathan didn't care much what else was under the tree. He got the one thing he was wanting all year and didn't ever expect would happen. He liked to pride himself on being simple and easy to be happy, but he had to admit he was excited about tomorrow morning, especially if this is how the night before just went. Rose opens hers. That's Jonathan's mother. Her name is Rose. "Oh my, honey, you shouldn't have. It's delightful. Another diamond necklace. I will wear it tomorrow, of course." Rose's husband. "Yes, that was the idea of why I gave it to you tonight, my dear. But this necklace is more beautiful than the other, isn't it? Look at that stone that sits in the middle. Why, as soon as I laid my eyes on it, I knew it was for you. You must have it for this Christmas." Jonathan, thinking to himself that his dad probably had the butler buy it for her because he was too busy, a guilt relief gift sort of thing for his father. He chuckled before saying, "Why, Mother, please do put it on. Let everyone in the room see how perfect it is on you." He was really good at covering his father's footsteps there. Rose smiled. "Oh, all right, but just for a moment. As I said, I am looking forward to wearing it with my Christmas outfit tomorrow, when everyone can really see how it stands out." She took the necklace she had on off and had her husband put the new one on and do it up. She wore it for but a moment, and everyone went, "Ooh, ah," and gasped. It was stunning. Diamonds always usually are. Jonathan, however, was used to his mother donning all kinds of shiny, sparkly items from all over her body, fingers, her wrists, her ears, and neck. Jonathan swears his first memory as a baby was diamonds on his mother. Lo, one by one, everyone got to take their turn, and soon everyone's gifts were all open. That's when Jonathan started yawning with all the aunts and uncles and cousins and his grandparents and siblings. It must have been well after midnight before the day was finally done. Jonathan says, "Can I go to my room now?" I'm very tired and wish to go to bed straight away. I want to be rested for the morning." Everyone in the room hugged young Master Jonathan one by one good night, and his mother waved him off to bed when she was done, grabbed his train set box, and ran carefully and quickly to the stairs, and up to the top and straight to his room. He was too tired to play with it tonight, but he was certain it would be the only thing he'd want to play with all day tomorrow. From the top of the stairs he yelled, "Good night, everyone!" They all said good night back, and off to his room Jonathan went from there for a good night's dream. Boy, was he ever looking forward to the morning this one Christmas. Clark's mother. And there you have it. That is what he told me about living in a castle full of rich people. Clark. So he told you this when you guys were dating? Clark's mother. Yes. Years before I ever knew I was certain to become his wife and your mother. He might not have been completely contented with his life as a young boy, but he was certain to share the good times with me. Well, it's getting late, and I think it's time for your mother to hit the hay, too. I hope this helped a little, Clark. Clark said, "Yes, Mom, it did, and I hope you can tell me another story on another day. I'd like to hear more about your life with Dad before I came along." Clark's mother. "Well, that, my son, can certainly be arranged. Stay tuned for more adventures of your parents' dating years." She kissed him on the forehead, got up from the couch, and went to bed. Clark sat there on the couch a little longer, thinking about how much more he didn't know, and how he was feeling about learning all this now, with his father gone. With that, he shook his head and went up to his room. He really missed Jonathan. The house just didn't feel right anymore. Didn't feel the same without him in it. Superwoman's Pod. Somewhere in Virginia, a long time ago, a mysterious object landed near the edge of a vagrant piece of land. No one saw the land, but the sound of it hitting the earth got the attention of several motor vehicles that had already passed the area on a nearby road. The first car stopped, and the driver got out of his car and started walking towards the back of it. This brought all the traffic to a sudden stop. Driver 1. "Did you hear that?" the first motorist said to the second as the second one got out of his car. Second motorist. "Where are you going?" The second motorist said to the first as the first walked past the second car. Second motorist. "You're holding up the traffic for everyone. Would you please get back in your car?" Third motorist. "Darn right, I heard that too," someone else said, jumping out of his truck and following in the first motorist's direction. Third motorist. "I thought I was going crazy for a minute, thinking I was hearing things. Thought maybe it was my car. Turned off my radio, but there was nothing." One vehicle took off, driving down the road the wrong way as fast as possible. "Guess they ain't too concerned with whatever it was we all heard." The other two vehicles started honking their horns before following suit with the vehicle that already took off. One of the honking car motorists rolled down his window and yelled at the top of his lungs to be sure he was heard. Fourth car. "You're never going to see nothing out there now, not at this time of day. It's too dark, mister. It's not worth the risk. Come back tomorrow during daylight and try again then." Then he rolled his window back up, followed the van that had already left, and the car behind him followed suit. The first motorist stopped at the edge of the road, a few cars up from them all, mumbling in agreement with how dark it was. Already too late to see anything at this time of day if there was something out there. But he was also thinking that if indeed there was something, if he waits until tomorrow, whatever it is could be gone or moved. At which point he thought, if that's the case, then it's probably nothing to worry about. As he turned around, the rest of the crowd, now outside their cars, all hollering the same thing, as he started walking back with one of the fellows with him. Did you see anything? Did ya? Not a blessed thing. And I'm not willing to break an ankle walking around in ditches at this time of the day. Won't do any good if I get hurt. All right, everyone, I'm sorry. I will be back in my car in a minute, and everyone is probably best to just go home. Call in what we all heard said with emphasis. At least reporting it to someone would be better than doing nothing at all. Second motorist. Ha ha ha. But we all know that 911, what 911 is like around here in these parts. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't get here until sometime next week to investigate our calls, the second motorist said to everyone, following the man back in the direction of his car. Slowly, everyone got comfortable behind the wheel of their vehicles and turned their engines back on, and one by one they headed in the direction of their final destinations, driving once again down the road. The newspaper article said a little girl was found wandering around the side of the road. She was a little unkempt, but otherwise in good health. But due to her young age, she was not able to help authorities with answering their questions. This led to the child being taken to the local orphanage, while police tried to find out if anyone else suspicious could be found. The strange looking pod thing found near where she was found was taken in by authorities. It would be years before that little girl would see that pod again, when they would finally release it to her. Jonathan put the newspaper stories safely away, knowing not to rock the boat with his wife and newfound son for the time being. Instead, he decided that it would be best to wait for the perfect time. But as time has already told us, that perfect time never came. Jonathan managed to keep track of the little girl's story long enough to learn that she lived in the orphanage, where she had been taken for a year and a half before the captain of the Navy, one S.H.R. Doyle, who was recently widowed, decided to adopt her to fill his empty nest syndrome since his wife's passing away. It would be years before Jonathan would do anything more, and unfortunately, again, he thought it better not to tell his wife and now grown son. Oh, Jonathan. I sure hope they forgive me when they finally find out. But I have to believe that if they came from the same place separately, that the people up there who sent them are far superior to us intellectually and therefore knew why they did it this way, and I shouldn't be the one to get in the way of that natural story of her separate life by getting in the way. Maybe he was right. Maybe he was wrong. But time certainly would tell a story of its own in Smallville one day, many years from the day Jonathan saved that newspaper clipping that ran this little girl's story. Captain S.H.R. Doyle. The captain has a wife who passes away, and he starts driving his boys on the base a bit crazy. All he does is sit there and talk to his stuffed cat, which he calls Ugly Bat Boy, and throws his ball against the wall. So one day, one of his crew members politely suggested he think about adopting a child. He sits on the idea for a while, and eventually he goes to the local orphanage, where he sees a young girl building an apartment complex with the decks of cards. This piqued his interest, and he asked to see her. Once in the visiting room, she, little superwoman, as a young girl, looks him up and down, as he too looks her over. At which point she says with a smile, "It's about time you got here. I've been sitting here waiting for a year and a half now. I'll just go get my stuff. It won't take me long to pack. I don't have much." Captain Doyle chuckles uncontrollably, turns to the lady running the orphanage and says, "I'll take her." And Virginia, Superwoman's soon-to-be established name, turns around and looks at both of the adults in the room before directing her focus back on the captain and says in quite a matter-of-fact-like way, with her hands on her hips, I just said that. No sense in repeating ourselves twice now, is there? Then off she went with a huge smile on her face to pack her belongings. Once arriving on base, her little buggy on wheels starts moving. She's pulling it along and saying, "Okay, so which one is it?" The captain laughs and says, "That one," pointing his finger to a house with a whole bunch of doohickeys everywhere, pinwheels sticking out of where flowers should be, and cricket stick frames on the front lawn, and at the same time they both say a similar thought in sentence. The captain says, "I think I'm going to like her here." Virginia says, "I think I'm going to like it here." "Where are the keys?" she says, once standing in front of the door. The captain, "What? Do you think you own the place, my dear little one, already?" As his grin hands her the key that unlocks the door. One day, sometime down the road, Aunt Virginia had made herself at home quite nicely in the Navy base. She's sitting down in front of the TV. When on a commercial break, she turns around, looks at her new dad, and says, Captain, watch me. I just had an epiphany. Watching comedy on TV. What am I doing?" Slowly folding the corner of the newspaper away from in front of his face, one of his eyes peeks out from over the edge of the paper as he says, "Quick now, before you lose my attention." Watching Virginia finish putting herself into place, Captain Doyle says, "Is this something like Pictionary, darling?" She smiles at him funny with her head tilted sideways. Captain Doyle says, Okay, you got me, sweetheart. What are you doing?" Virginia says, "Why, it's stand-up comedy. Divorcing Beethoven's stool, of course, Captain." And with a self-satisfying look of glee on her face, she climbs down from where she was standing and returns to watching the television. End scene.